Well, with the magic of television and the fact that we're sitting here in my living room, and well, it's just sort of a friendly little place with blackout drapes now, and we have two old friends. I've got Ellen sitting on the couch, and Chris, who was on the air just a little while ago, sitting on the couch, and the one lady who doesn't want to be on television here, I'm not going to show her, but she was one of your subjects, Paul, at one of the demonstrations we did over at the Masonic Temple there, which was so good. And I promised you we were going to have one of those things to show, because we've got a couple of them recorded that Richard did, but he's had to go off to do something because one of his sons is getting married and they have some sort of wedding thing tonight that they've got to go to. So my guest is Paul Swingle, and you can find Swingle at Dr. Swingle and Associates.
That's right.
www.swingleandassociates.com on the net. And Paul is the author of Biofeedback for the Brain, which is a book that you can buy on his website or at any good bookstore. You can order it. And tonight we are going to talk about strokes. We're going to talk about age-related dementia, etc., which I guess is Alzheimer's. And you're going to talk about optimal performance training. Now, that's the brain brightening thing that you've done to me a couple of times. It didn't work very well. I can't find my glasses. Anyway, it does.
There are exceptions to everything.
I will tell you that Paul in 1997, December 19, phoned up and said, "Do you want to have your head examined?" And I said, "Huh?" And he said, "Yeah, we've been trying to figure what to give you for Christmas." So I went down and had my head examined, and the rest of it is a story that just unfolded and became wonderful, because you fixed my son, you fixed another person very closely acquainted to, and from our program last week, you've had two people go into your office this week that have told me. So I got an email after you went off, after you had left, and I phoned you that night. And that email, when I got it, brought tears to my eyes. It was just a lady who I have never met, and you're not going to talk about her, but I will, and I know she won't mind. A lady that I've never met, but is in something of the same business that I am, watched the program because she's on my email list, and she wrote a letter that said, for the first time she has hope. And this is another one of these cases, because just like I had never said anything to you about my son, and lots of people, it's a big secret in their family when somebody has a problem. Right? It's a secret.
And it's a family problem.
And it's a family problem.
Are family problems.
And it amazes me how many people that I have known over the last 10 years since I first met you, and we started doing television shows, have walked up to me and said, "David, thank you for having you on the air, because they took their son, their daughter, their husband, their sister, their somebody down to see you, and you changed their life." And I get little shivers in my back every time I think about it, because it's that kind of emotion that they engender. So you did it again. You did it last week. You brought tears to my eyes. A lady did it, and then somebody else phoned, and they got an appointment. So, strokes. What can you do for me? I've had a stroke.
Well, it depends on how severe the stroke. The issue is, where is the damage and what kind of complications do you have?
Because sometimes people have a whole right side that they can't move, or their left side, or they can't speak.
Actually, you know, I said to you I was going to bring a tape of a brain-injured woman that I treated.
Yes, you did.
There's a good example. I have her voice on an answering machine when she first called to make an appointment. Then her voice is very garbled and unclear, and obviously she's having problems with articulation. And she called back to make another appointment about 10 sessions later, and her voice is crystal clear. Now, when you're dealing with stroke, the question is how much damage is there. are you going to have to get other areas of the brain to assume responsibility for that activity? Now, there are lots of things that we can do. The first thing that we can do is to unlock the areas of the brain that are surrounding the damage. What we've found is that a lot of the inhibition and restriction of activity is a function of the brain protecting itself against further damage.
Oh, so there's a little thing right here, and it surrounds it so nothing can get through to get at it.
Basically, that's about it.
This is
So
okay.
you release that inhibitory process, so you start to regain some function. Now, there are circumstances in which you want to get other areas of the brain to assume responsibility for something that it doesn't generally assume responsibility
Well, are you
for.
saying that if this part's broken, that you can have this part over here regenerate
Exactly.
or reprogram itself to do that job?
Bingo. Now, where that came from is some work with the blind and some work using physical restraint procedures with stroke victims. Very, very interesting work. Now, what you do is if you restrain the good arm of a person who has had a stroke that implicates the left arm, for example, you restrain the good one, so you force them to use the left hand. Eventually, there will be an area of the brain that starts to light up. And you can facilitate that process with neurotherapy by lighting up that area of the brain, and that assumes responsibility, control, if you will, over the function that has been implicated by the stroke.
So, sort of the same thing as if I lost my right arm in an industrial accident, my left arm would, by very virtue, that's the only one I'm using. So it obviously trained itself to be better, but you force the brain to train itself.
That's right, exactly. And you get different areas, expansion of areas, assuming responsibility. Now, the interesting thing about neurotherapy and stroke is we were taught when I went to school, what we were taught in medical and graduate school when I went to school, just wrong, period. We were taught that after 18 months of a head injury or a stroke, you're not going to have any further recovery. That's nonsense, absolute nonsense. We have individuals 20 years post-accident in which we can get some remarkable recovery of function.
You could be sitting out there with your husband, brother, sister, child that was in a stroke or a head injury. Would this same thing apply to a closed head injury?
That's correct.
What about a concussion? You slip on the ice and you whack your head.
Yes.
So even 20 years later, something could come along and you could improve it.
Yes. Now, a lot of the really pioneering work on that was done by Dr. John Walker in Dallas, Texas. He's a board-certified neurologist who does neurotherapy. So neurotherapy is starting to move into more conventional medical communities in which some really brave people are moving out and doing
the difference when I first met you,
Mm-hmm.
and again I'm going to say to my audience, because these are, even though I might have said it 2 shows ago and 3 shows ago, got to say it again because you might not ever see those ones. We can't assume everybody watches everything. Is that Paul Swingle, when I met this man, and he told me what he did, I didn't believe him. I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I fix ADD and cure ADD." And as I quite commonly mentioned, Shirley Stalker from CKNW had just done a 2-hour documentary, and what Paul was saying didn't exist. The documentary was a heavy-duty documentary, dealt with kids in Kelowna and everywhere else, and the documentary was how to deal with your child with ADD. Nowhere in that documentary did it say, you fix it. And you said, you fix it, and you have the honor of being the only person out of 1,000 people that I had on that one show that I ever vetted before putting you on the air, because when you said that to me, you sounded like